November 30th, 1906. Crossing Cherry Park yesterday, I encountered a sick dog expelling from its body worm-like creatures. It was particularly offensive, but I found myself drawn to watching the worms move around on the ground after the dog and owner left. I wondered at my own fascination and the lowly act of observing excrement in the dirt. I thought what I might do if one of my schoolmates would see me, or worse yet, Mrs. Browning, but a stronger thought overwhelmed me, an understanding that was too powerful to turn away from. It was this. The worms showed me Mr. Soper's scientific theory. They showed me how one creature can live inside another, eating from it. Once sated, the creature is expelled out into the world through the feces, where another animal can pick it up. It became clear to me how a fever spreads. If the cook uses the toilet while she's working and doesn't clean her hands well after returning to the bathroom, she passes the typhoid creature, bacteria he called it, out of her body and into her households. Mr. Soper has told me that these germs are shaped like noodles, and maybe they have limbs to propel them. Fascinating how these living things can live inside us, but I still don't see why Mary doesn't get sick herself. I must figure that part out if I can. I wish I could get into the laboratory and look through the microscope and see for myself what the typhoid germ looks like, but Mr. Soper has not yet responded to my few subtle queries to that effect. In fact, he had me working all week at the task of contacting every employment bureau in the city by telephone to find Mary Mallon. I have never used a telephone, and I was quite excited at first. I had the impression a voice would magically appear on the other end like in a conversation. Instead, it required heavy manual labor to produce a reply. You have to crank the handle on the square wooden box to speak into the switchboard operator, and that handset like holding an iron against my ear. Half the bosses I reached seemed to be answering from beneath the river. The other half had tin throats. Most times, I had to yell and repeat my query and pressed the set so close to my ear for replies. I feel as if I've been pummeled. I studied the instrument, the box, the wires, the metal handset, and I cannot figure out how a voice can travel through it all. Mr. Soper says the telephone converts the voice into electrical impulses which vibrate the wire and then are transformed back to what sounds like a voice. It has to do with the characteristics of sound waves. An invention of affection, he called it. Mr. Bell created the telephone to communicate with his mother and his wife, who were both deaf. By the end of the week, I was almost wishing I had one of the convenient contraptions at home, imagining Anushka had one too. The wonder of it. Finally, I could locate the Cook's present employment bureau without taking a single streetcar trip. From the bureau, we found out that the cook currently works for a family on Fifth Avenue. Mr. Soper spent some time thinking of how to approach her. I imagine she must be wondering why it is that the typhoid seems to follow her each job, he said. I think she'd be grateful to know that she carries the disease inside of her and spreads it like the spice of her cooking, I said. Of course, I did not mean it to be a joke. It was simply the picture that came to me. But Mr. Soper's brow darkened at my words, and he barked at me with a sharp reply. Prudence, this is an epidemic we're facing here. This woman is very likely responsible for a girl's death and the illness of many others, and a humorous approach will not help her fathom the gravity of the situation. We must find a way to explain this in the proper manner, in a way she'll understand. His admonishment still rings in my head, and I apologized, but Mr. Soper hardly heard me. My foolishness hung from me like a sign. Now back up to the second word in that paragraph. The word admonishment is one of your vocabulary words. Go back in your notebook, see what you guessed, see if it fits with this in this spot, and then please check to see what the word really means. I bet you can figure this one out. He went on, if he knows of the possible danger she is bringing into household, if she's made aware of it, I believe she'll work with us. We need to convince her of the importance of testing. We must check her bodily fluids, urine, blood, and feces. We must tread lightly with her, however, as this is a new theory and is not yet proven. Surely she'll understand that she's connected somehow, I ventured to him, trying to make up for my joke. We'll approach her at her place of work, he said. The laboratory results will give us our answer. He turned his attention to another task in the office, and I watched him for a minute over the typewriter. Here is a man who has not only solved epidemics, but other things too, like the running water they installed in our neighborhood tenements and the toilets they put downstairs, and all of this to conquer those things that cause death. His goal is cleanliness and orderliness that will bring health to everyone who lives here. I feel sometimes as if I'm drowning in the sea of unknowns, and Mr. Soper is like a ship passing. I call to him, but my mouth is full of dark water, and soon he is out of reach. He seems to work all hours and never speaks of family he must return to, not even for holidays like Thanksgiving. He is the first person I've met whose home life I cannot imagine. He never seems to need a rest. He lives for his work. One day I hope to be like him, my whole soul focused on my work to the exclusion of all else. Yet I think I would be lonely without my family. We spent the holiday with Aunt Rachel and Uncle David in Williamsburg, and they were so generous, baking pumpkin pie and turkey legs, mashed yams and challah bread, and to celebrate the coming together of the Pilgrims and the Red Man. Uncle David invited a man from the factory, and I'm not sure how I feel about him. Directly after supper, Marm sat alone, apple-cheeked in the corner until the man went over and presented himself to her. It seemed expected that the two of them would meet. This man and Marm, I believe Uncle David invited him for that purpose, and I watched Marm very closely for her reaction. It's been 8 years since my father left, and in all that time, men's attention have rolled off my pretty Marm like water drops. I think my absence and the emptiness of my long work hours away from our apartment have given her thought. Maybe she is worried that I'll leave her. Maybe the day has come. Maybe my matchmaking aunt, as she has tried in the past, has succeeded in convincing her that it's time. The thought hardens my stomach. This man from Uncle David's factory is handsome, with rounded features and a streak of gray in his otherwise dark hair. His eyes look directly and intelligently at a person. Despite Marm's discomfort, he was persistent and discussed all manner of subjects with her, but Marm is not like her sister Rachel, comfortable in her marriage and to the same man for 22 years. She is like me, used to being alone. Now back up to the last line on page 102 where persistent is found. That's another one of your words, I think. So you're going to want to see if what you guessed it meant is what it means in context, and then check it to see if you're right. A peachy glow rose on her cheeks as they spoke, and she laughed at the things he said. Her eyes flitted to me, seeming surprised at her own laughter, guilty at it even. Yet she seemed engaged, happy, joyous in a way I haven't seen her in a long time. I have to say it bothered me. I loved to see her so happy, but I worried about my father, what he might think, what her neighbors would say. Marm with another man. Yet even Mrs. Zambarger thinks Mom should surrender the thought of my father's return. Before the night was through, the man was able to extract a promise of an outing with Marm. I cannot imagine her on an outing with a man. It doesn't fit. She is otherwise occupied. She is married. She's mated for life until death. Later, I overheard Aunt Rachel and Uncle David talking in the kitchen about Marm marrying this man, and that made my throat hurt. What if the day came when my father returned and Marm had married Mr. Silver? What would happen to my father? What would happen to me? I feel torn by this man's appearance, concerned for my lonely Marm and fearful for my father's broken heart, should he ever return. I feel we should wait for him, just me and Marm alone, even if that means waiting forever. Receiving his checks is a reminder of him every month. It keeps alive the hope that he will come back, despite what our neighbors and friends say. I talked with Marm about the man on the way home, and she seemed to view him kindly. He's a friend, Prudence, a gentle person to talk to, one who knows your aunt and uncle, that's all. He seemed keen on you, I said. She pulled me to her, kissed my cheek. We held hands. She said, I know what you're thinking, and there's nothing to worry about. He knows about your father, and he mentions only friendship. That's all I asked? That's all, she said. I worry that my Marm contains pockets of loneliness that even a daughter cannot fill. When I think about my father, I feel as if he and I are in the dense fog. He's backing away from me slowly, and the edges of the fog closing in on him, making it harder and harder for me to see him. Any day, I fear, any day he'll turn away from me and be gone from my sight. forever.